Hey, what's going on, Ram fans? Mark from Rams Up here. Another May gray day here where I'm at, but looks like the weather is going to improve in a few days. But a good day to record, I suppose. Now, the gist of this episode, the meat of this episode, is going to be that Rams Legends draft I participated in the other day with Payo Time, three other Rams content creators. We went around the horn drafting our all-time Ram rosters, and I'll show the results of that. I think I did pretty well. We'll get into that in a minute. Offense, defense, and then special teams. It was a lot of fun. One of the funnest collaborations I've ever participated in. That was with Rams House, Rams Showcase, and First and Tuna. Good stuff. It was a lot of fun. And I encourage you to seek those podcast YouTube channels out, support them, support all those Rams content creators, please. Now, it is episode 727, and I'm going to talk first about a player who wore number 27. So, in between the years of, let's just say, in between the Greatest Show on Turf and the Sean McVay era, I think the Rams were just signing free agents willy-nilly. They really didn't have a plan. They occasionally drafted, or I should say, signed free agents that looked very promising. We're going to get this franchise turned around. Man, there were some dark days there. But, a lot of these guys were good players, but there wasn't really a plan. There wasn't really a long-term program to get this franchise, get this roster built correctly. But one guy they did sign that I thought was at the time going to be a pretty good addition to this team was number 27, Quinton McCloud, the safety out of Boise State. Went undrafted in 2003 and really established himself as a solid safety with the Eagles. And then was signed by the Rams, played 2 years for the Rams, 2011 and 2012, started all 32 games. And, he was a solid player. Didn't, the franchise was still floundering. He moved on to the Carolina Panthers after that. Number 27, Quinton McCloud. And why am I talking about him? I'm not going to focus on just the stars, the Hall of Famers, the great players. I like to talk about guys maybe we forgot about and, made their contributions to the Rams in one way or another. Quinton McCloud is one of them, number 27 for the then St. Louis Rams. So let's get into this draft. So the way it worked was they threw out a trivia question, and whoever got it right had the first pick. And it was, who are the four Rams quarterbacks that have been drafted by Les Snead? And I got the first two, Jared Goff, Stetson Bennett. And then we all kind of floundered on the last two. And I ended up picking fourth, and it was not a snake draft. So I was kind of handicapped from the get-go, drafting fourth every round, but I wasn't going to complain because this was just for fun. But let's look at how this turned out. I'll talk about the offense first. And since, a lot of you listen on the podcast, I'm not going to spend too much time comparing rosters. But what I have on the screen here is my roster, my offensive selections, and Big Tuna's offensive selections. And I was pretty happy with my team. I had a dilemma. I could have selected Matthew Stafford or Kurt Warner. I was the first one to select a quarterback, by the way. And I went with Warner, and I will defend that by saying he was a two-time NFL MVP, played in 3 Super Bowls. And by the way, the rules going in, you could select any player who played one game for the Rams. And so the thought process here is if a player had a great career and played 1 or 2 years with the Rams, you think about guys like OBJ and Von Miller, you could go ahead and select them. I tried to steer away from that, though. I tried to focus on guys that made their names with the Rams, and I did that with a couple of exceptions. But anyways, so I selected Kurt Warner over Matthew Stafford, and, I was really torn about that decision, but I went with Warner. And, a strategy kind of fell into my lap. You're only drafting 1 running back and 3 wide receivers. And as stacked as the Rams running back group is, I waited and waited and waited, and everybody picked off these who they saw as the top three running backs: Eric Dickerson, Marshall Faulk, and Steven Jackson. And I have no argument with that. But I got Todd Gurley, I think, in like the 20th round. So, and I could have waited till the last pick, but I was afraid someone was going to select them for select Gurley as their kick returner, and then I would have been left with, it wouldn't have been that bad. I could have selected Jerome Bettis, but my defense of Gurley is in his prime, I think he was the best of all of them. For that 2 3 year stretch, I went and looked it up. Just crazy numbers. I think he had 42 TDs over a 3 year period. Just electric. And he had one of my favorite plays of all time. I've talked about it too much, probably, that run at the end of the first half in Seattle put the Rams up 35 to nothing or something like that. 48, 53-yard run, whatever it was. So I'm really happy with that. And then I got the three wide receivers: Isaac Bruce, Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch, and Henry Ellard. Three wide receivers from three different eras, and the first, third, and fifth wide receivers in total yardage in Rams history. And then offensive line, I think I killed it. I was hoping to get Orlando Pace, but going fourth each round, I missed out on some guys, but I did get Jackie Slater, and I got, in my opinion, the greatest interior offensive lineman in Rams history, Tom Mack. And then I got two great players from the 70s, Joe Schiavelli and Charlie Cowan, as my other guard and tackle. And then perhaps the weak spot, if I could put it that way, my center, Andy McCollum. And the problem with the center position, there's really only three guys that merit selection, in my opinion: Rich Saul, Ken Iman, and Doug Smith. After that, you're talking about guys like Andy McCollum. So a little bit of a drop off there. But, between those guys, I counted, let me get my years here right, 23 Pro Bowl appearances. Tom Mack accounted for 11 of them. Jackie Slater and Joe Schiavelli combined for 35 years with the Rams. So I was really happy with that. And Pete Holohan, and he was the one guy I selected that made his name more with other teams, the Chargers primarily. But interesting fact, we get into these other tight ends that were selected. Tyler Higbee is the all-time leading tight end receiver for the Rams. And then the other three that were selected were Holohan, Everett, and Michael H. I'm not going to say his last name. I'm going to just destroy it. Homan Awanui. I think First and Tuna, who selected him, was just kind of having fun with this. He picked Ryan Fitzpatrick as his quarterback, for example. Still came away with a pretty good team. Wasn't thrilled with with some of his selections, but hey, it's just for fun. I'm not gonna throw First and Tuna under the bus. He did a good job. He had more fun with it than the rest of us, I think. Kind of throwing out some crazy picks just for fun. But you know, the interesting fact is, even though he made his name with other teams, Pete Houlihan was second among these guys of these four tight ends in receiving yards as a Ram, and he actually had more yards than Higbee over his career. So you could make an argument that if you're talking about picking players that only played one game for the Rams, were you kind of taking their whole resume, right? Or are you? I don't know. But Pete Holohan, a solid pick. He was kind of my secret pick. I was kind of sitting on that and focusing on other positions. So First and Tuna, as I said, he liked his running backs, SJ39, wide receivers, Cooper Kupp and OBJ. Brandon Cooks, I think, is a big drop off. His offensive line, pretty solid: Orlando Pace, Doug Smith, Rich Saul, Kevin Dotson, and Fred Miller. I thought he could have been done better than that. And the tight end, if you're looking to run the ball a lot, Michael Humanawani would be a solid pick. Now, moving on I'll just talk real briefly about these other teams. Rams House, pretty solid on the skill positions. Jim Everett, the Rams' all-time leading receiver. I think he would be third or fourth in the quarterback list, in my opinion, at best. Falk, Holt, Nakua, and Flipper Anderson. Really good. Did not like his offensive line, though. Lyric Jackson, Austin Corbett, John Sullivan, Roger Saffold, and Rob Havenstein. Now, as a group, not too shabby, but given all these great Rams offensive linemen, I think he takes a backseat to mine. Sorry, Rams House, if you hear this. It's just, hey, it's kind of like fantasy football. You better like your team because you're the one that selected it, right? And I really like my team. And then his tight end was Gerald Everett, who I think, probably a toss up between him and Holohan. And I should say that my approach in this, as far as eras, I picked Elroy Crazy Leg Hirsch, and I picked some other old time. I probably picked more old timers than others, and I think in this assessment, some of you may disagree. I did not consider the fact that Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch might not make the Rams 53-man roster today. I understand that. But in his time, he was the best. So you can take it either way. You kind of, how do you weigh that? That's up to you. But I did not consider that. Otherwise, if you're looking for the all-time Rams roster, you're probably talking about, the last 5 or 6 years, sprinkle in some greatest show on turf guys, and you're done, right? You're not going to consider, well, maybe Eric Dickerson and a smattering of old timers, but I leaned on every era equally for the most part, I think. So we'll move on to Ram Showcase's team. Stafford and Dickerson, not too bad. Not thrilled with his wide receivers, though. Robert Woods, Danny Amendola, and Brandon Lloyd. And his offensive line, he's got a mix of some really good players. Andrew Whitworth, Adam Timmerman, who is on my list, Ken Iman, probably the second best center, and then Dennis Hara, Kyle Turley. If you're looking for some nastiness, but I thought there were better guys out there. And then Tyler Higbee, can't argue with that. I think where I am better in comparison between these two teams is my wide receiver group just kills it. Bruce, Crazy Legs, and Ellard compared to Woods, Amendola, and Lloyd. So sorry, Rams House. I'm going to give myself the nod on that. Now, if I'm sorry, that's Rams Showcase. And if Rams Showcase is doing the same, he's probably going to pick his roster over mine because, darn it, he's the one that selected it, right? Now we're going to get into the defense here. And I don't think I was as solid in my defensive picks as I was on offense, but I was still pretty happy with my team. Again, picking last every round, not a snake draft, which really hurt me. I was hoping to get Aaron Donald. That would have been my first pick. I had to settle for Merlin Olsen, and then I got a member of the Fearsome Foursome there, Rosie Greer. And then I selected later Kevin Carter and my defensive end, Von Miller, one of my few selections of a guy that was, made more of his name elsewhere, but he did contribute to a Rams Super Bowl. And then I got two old school, big time inside linebackers, Isaiah Robertson and Jack Hacksaw Reynolds. And Reynolds, although he made his name with the 49ers, maybe more so than the Rams, he did have a substantial career with the Rams. And then two solid cornerbacks. The cornerback group for the Rams, there's just a bunch of guys that are very close in talent level. I think, Jalen Ramsey might be the exception, but Leroy Irvin and Todd Light, not too shabby. And then my safeties, I took a flyer on a guy that I think is underrated. I just wanted this is probably my one pick that kind of came out of nowhere, and that is strong safety Toby Wright, big time hitter. And then free safety Eddie Meter, old time player, Hall of Famer. And I'll defend that pick just by the fact he's a Hall of Famer. And then the way they did the defenses here, since there's so many different defensive alignments that you could go for, you could add a third linebacker, an extra DB, an extra defensive lineman. I selected Leonard Little, a guy that can come off the edge for you, along with Von Miller. So it may be a little bit of an awkward defensive alignment. Not a cheetah alignment, that's for sure, with Isaiah and Hacksaw in there. but still a pretty solid team. Now, first in Tuna, real quickly, his defensive line, Michael Brockers, Leroy Glover, Robert Quinn, Chris Long. Quinn was the only one on my list of potential picks here. Linebackers, London Fletcher, solid. And then Alec Ogletree, one of my favorites. His cornerbacks, Janoris Jenkins, Jackrabbit Jenkins, was on my list. He fell to Big Tuna, or First and Tuna, I should say. And Cortland Finnegan, who, certainly if you're looking for some nastiness, that's fine. But yeah, like I say, a lot of cornerbacks in Rams history that are very close to each other in talent. And then Aeneas Williams, he was on my get list. I did not get him, obviously. Now, he picked John Johnson, or was it Johnny Johnson? When he made that selection, this is for another safety position. I assumed he was talking about the safety, out of Texas that played for the Rams in I believe it was late 70s, early 80s. But he might have meant John Johnson, the more recent John Johnson. But either way, I think the earlier one would have been the better pick. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that is what he meant. And then his wild card defender was Jared Verse. Can't argue with that. But I think overall, I think my defensive line, you got to give the nod to my defensive line here. And everything else, maybe a little bit of a wash there. So let's quickly look at Rams house defense. And I liked his defensive line: Kobe Turner, Larry Brooks, Deacon Jones, Jack Youngblood. Three of the four I would consider. James Laurinaitis, the Rams' all-time leader in tackles, solid pick. Mark Barron as a linebacker. Now, I'm not so sure about that. Cornerbacks, he nailed it. Jalen Ramsey and Dick Night Train Lane, two guys that were on my list. And Rodney McLeod as one of the top 8 safeties in Rams history, not so sure, but Nolan Cromwell definitely is. He was a guy I wanted to select and missed out on him. And then his wild card was Dante Fowler. So a lot of us going with those first three of us going with guys that can get to the quarterback: Jared Verse, Dante Fowler, and Leonard Little. So I might give him the edge as far as the defensive line. I like my linebackers, Robertson and Reynolds, over Laurinaitis and Barron. Cornerbacks, he might have a slight edge on me: Ramsey and Dick Night Train Lane versus Leroy Irvin and Todd Lay. And the thing about Leroy Irvin, not that it matters here, he was an incredible punt returner. And I think, I don't know, Eddie Meter, Nolan Cromwell, a wash. Toby Wright, Rodney McLeod. I'm going to take Toby Wright, but yeah, that's kind of a coin toss. And Leonard Little, Dante Fowler. I'd give the edge to Little just for his longevity with the Rams, although I don't know if that is a fair consideration. And we'll go to the last defensive comparison here, the Rams showcase. And they obviously went first because they have Aaron Donald. He was going to be my first pick. DeMarco Farr as another defensive tackle. I don't know, considering, Aaron Donald and Farr versus Olsen and Greer, you give a lot of weight on Donald, but Merlin Olsen, no slouch, and by some metrics, the greatest Ram ever. I don't think that's true, but based on his the length of the time he played for the Rams, the amount of damage he did as a defensive tackle playing alongside Deacon Jones, crazy good. And then he did pick another member of the fearsome foursome, Lamar Lundy, and then he had Kevin Green as well as his defensive end. So Green and Lundy versus Von Miller and Kevin Carter probably give him a slight edge there. And then he picked Bobby Wagner as his linebacker. And then like how much weight do you give that? Do you penalize him because Wagner was here just 1 year? I guess it depends on how you're judging this. If you're judging Bobby Wagner for his career, yeah, then he got the best linebacker in this entire draft. His other guy was Roman Pfeiffer, which is defensible. His cornerbacks, Dre Bly, like that pick. Tremaine Johnson, I don't know, Dre Bly, Tremaine Johnson versus Leroy Irvin and Todd Light. I think I win that. And then his safeties were Eric Weddle and OJ Atagwe. You know, Weddle came. I was going to pick Weddle as my flex player, that defensive player, but he went to Ram Showcase. So Eric Weddle versus and OJ Atagwe. Atagwe, I get it, extremely underrated player, and we talked about this during the draft. All these players that play for the Rams, including the guy we talked about, number 27 there at the top of this podcast, Quinton McCloud, OJ Atagwe, another guy, Toby Wright, an additional one that played in the dark days and did not get the credit they deserved. Steven Jackson's another one. There's a bunch of them, but so he picked Weddle and Atagwe versus Wright and Meter. Well, Meter's a Hall of Famer, let's not forget that. And then his flex defensive player, he added another defensive lineman, Leslie O'Neal, another guy that played briefly for the Rams. So Little versus O'Neal. O'Neal probably overall the better player. So pretty close there. Our Aaron Donald, and if you're going to give him credit for Bobby Wagner and Leslie O'Neal, he probably edges me as far as the defense goes. And then we did special teams, and this is where I think I won out over here in special teams. Who's the best kicker in Rams history? And by the way, we're selecting a kicker, a punter, and a kick returner. Who's the best Rams kicker? If you go and I looked at the data and I went by who had the most 50-plus yard field goals. And Greg the Leg was the easy answer for me, and that's who I drafted. The other drafted kickers were Matt Gay, Josh Brown, Jeff Wilkins. Surprised Mike Lansford wasn't drafted, who was more of a clutch kicker, but I don't think he had any 50-plus yarders. Frank Corral, another guy, consistent clutch kicker, but not a big leg. So I think I had the best kicker. And when we're talking about kick returners, Tavon Austin went before my guy. I think Oz Hakeem went before my guy. And then Dante Hall. Again, if you're giving credit for their entire career, Dante Hall, one of the best kick returners ever. But I picked Tony Horn, and I'm surprised he was bypassed by the others. Greatest show on turf, Tony Horn. Probably was the best kick returner in the league at that time. And then punters, I got a little tricky here. Johnny Hecker went to First and Tuna. Donnie Jones went to Rams Showcase. They all make sense. Ethan Evans to Rams House. He's had one good year, really. So not sure how I feel about that. And I pulled one out of the hat here. I think he's the fifth or sixth rated or all-time punter for the Rams, Norm Van Brocklin, and not too shabby, averaged 43 yards per kick. And, there are some other guys I could have picked, but Sean Landetta was on my list. But I went with Norm Van Brocklin just to kind of wow the crowd there, right? And I think I won special teams, but, that Dante Hall factor kind of messes things up there. And First and Tuna, he had Johnny Hecker and Tavon Austin. And Tavon Austin, man, poor guy. I don't know how many kicks he had, mostly punt returns, I thought, that were called back for holding. I swear there must have been 5 that were long returns, potentially touchdowns. And you're just looking for that little yellow icon to pop up on his returns. Happened over and over and over again. But there you have it. I think I did pretty darn good considering I went 4th every round. And I was pretty proud of how I did. A couple of weaknesses. Maybe I could have done better at center. Maybe I could have done a little better at in the defensive backfield. But other than that, pretty solid team. I'm happy with it. And let me know in the comments how you think I did. If you think one of these other teams did better than I did, one of these other Rams content creators, I think I had the edge, one advantage over these guys. I think I have a better understanding of the The old time Rams, and how great some of them were. Guys like Tom Mack and Eddie Meter, maybe not on their radar. Tom Mack was on my on the top of my list of guys I had to get, and I did. So I was really happy with that. So let me know how you think I did. Don't forget, subscribe, like, and share these videos and these podcasts. Really appreciate it. Out here from Rams Up.